for all of our members. So thank you for joining us. My name is Yvonne Myers. I'm the COO here at the Fort Collins Area Chamber of Commerce. And this is our Tuesday Talent Series with Chrysta Bairre. And her title of her presentation today is Mental Wellness Through Change and Uncertainty. Chrysta Bairre is an advocate for herself and others. As a child, she grew up in poverty, surrounded by family members with mental illness and addiction, while her own non-apparent disability went unrecognized and undiagnosed. A queer woman with several disabilities, she fought to get the help and support she needed to thrive and became a voice for unseen and underserved people like herself. Today, Chrysta is an author and professional speaker, helping individuals increase their income and impact through valuing their own inherent worth, setting boundaries, and saying no in business, and advocating for themselves. She engages and inspires on stage, speaking to employees on banishing burnout, overcoming imposter syndrome, and workplace mental health. Chrysta is also the founder of She Goes High, a 1,900 plus member introvert and neurodivergent friendly community for women and non-binary leaders in Northern Colorado. She Goes High hosts more than 30 events per year to support women leaders in taking up their space in the world and leaving their legacy. Her first book, Beautiful Badass: How to Believe in Yourself Against the Odds, shares stories and lessons from overcoming poverty and depression in this guide for women who want to take command of their destinies and no longer fall prey to the hardships and setbacks that previously defined them. She is currently writing her next book on the topic of asking for help. And I turn everything over to you, Chrysta. So excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you here today. We have a small group today. It's the day after a long weekend, so I think a lot of people are just getting back into trying to figure out what day it actually is, getting back into the week, trying to readjust from like barbecues and, fun to like work. I don't want to answer emails or sit in front of a Zoom screen, so very glad to have you here today. Since we have such a small group, I would love to open it up and hear on this topic, like what is it that you really want to learn here today? Or what about this topic caused you to register and take your time out the day after a long weekend, a holiday week? I'm sure there's a lot of things that are requiring your attention. So would love to hear from you because we do have the opportunity to like tailor this presentation a bit to who actually has shown up here today. So feel free to unmute yourself or put in the chat something that you want to learn today. I mean, this is not required. You don't have to, but if you want to share something, I would love to hear it.
I'll say that to me, it's of interest because I would like to figure out how, I guess, what resources are available to our team if they feel in need. But I have to also admit that I'm coming at it from a point of view that I feel a little, I don't know what the proper term is, aggrieved or put out by the current fact that we're supposed to support our employees on every level, like on a friendship level, on a family level, on a societal level, like are we their only safety net? Like, why is this our responsibility? While at the same time acknowledging that those problems are out there and I would like to be able to help where I can, or at least point them and myself in the right direction for resources. So
Yeah.
I guess maybe I'm it's maybe a little more negative than you maybe hoped we would show up with. But anyway.
No, I so appreciate your honesty. Really, I love it. I love starting off with like what's really present in the room rather than people being like, oh, it is nice to say, because I feel like that's when we can really start to have a more powerful and relevant conversation is when it's like, this is honestly really what I'm showing up with today. So I super appreciate that. Thank you, Carol. Um, and then I'm seeing in the chat, we've got a comment. The topic was intriguing to me because times are a bit crazy right now, and I just love to hear some ideas on how to implement and help our staff and personally as well. Yeah, so thank you for that, Steph. Any other thoughts or comments anyone wants to share? And we'll have the opportunity to be super conversational throughout this. This is not like a sit and get kind of a presentation. So you can always, of course, pipe in, ask questions, leave comments and feedback throughout.
I'll agree
Yeah.
100% with what Carol said. I'm right there with her just because of Yeah, I run a nonprofit, and nonprofits over the past year and a half has definitely been a struggle, and trying to get my team through
Mhm.
everything that has been thrown our way over the past year and a half has been
Mhm.
interesting, but also making sure that, yes, I'm there for my team, but as an executive director, I'm also taking care of myself as well too.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, thank you for that, Justin. I appreciate it. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we'll just dive in. And like I said, we'll have an opportunity to hear from you and throughout the presentation to really have this be a relevant conversation. And I want to start off by saying that, I had this conversation with the chamber about which topic to pick. And I'm like, this topic will support you in supporting your employees, but really the primary focus of this topic is to support you. And there's a couple of reasons why I take that approach. And I think that's really important because, first of all, it's really hard to be there for other people when we are depleted, under-resourced, feeling the strain ourselves. We're just not able to do it. We're not able to be there for our team, for our staff, for those people when we are ourselves under-resourced, feeling unsupported, struggling in some way. So hopefully this is a space where you're going to feel a little bit supported. You're going to feel like you're walking away with some tools and resources. Another reason I feel like this approach is really important as well is because it really isn't your job to support your team directly around their mental health, right? I think as leaders, we do have the opportunity to create space within our organizations for people to be well, to have, health and wellness. But it's not our job to make them well. We can just create the space for that. But how do we do that? I am a firm believer that leading by example is also the best way to do that. I have worked with organizations in the past where the executive leadership says these are our values and this is what we believe, like for example work-life balance, and they say at this company we support work-life balance. But when the staff is looking at the leaders and the leaders are not actually showing work-life balance, when they're working long hours and taking calls all the time and that kind of thing, even if they're saying this is what the organization supports, the staff don't always feel like they actually have permission to do the things to take care of themselves and create that work-life balance. And that's just an example, right? So again, I think this conversation is important to start with the leaders, because if you're saying, hey, these are some things these are values we have in our organization, or these are some things that we want to create for our employee. We want to create wellness. We want to, create a space where wellness happens. If the leaders aren't leading by example, then the staff is not going to follow, no matter what your organizational values or, your mission statement or whatever is, right? So it really starts with the leaders, in my opinion. And so that's kind of the direction that we start this conversation. And I will say, I'm a firm believer that no person is responsible for another person's mental health, right? You are not responsible for anyone else's mental health. And Carol, to speak to, your comments in the beginning, which again, I so appreciate, is you're like, why is it our job as a leader to support people in all of these ways? And my thought on that, and I'd love to hear thoughts from anyone else on this call if you have additional thoughts. But my thought on that is it's not really a leader's job to take care of the personal health and wellness and family and friends and all of that of our staff. But one thing that we know from a lot of data, from a lot of research that's out there, is that one of the ways that organizations can decrease turnover, have staff that are more productive, that are doing better work, is when they feel like they have what they need to be successful at work and in life, right? So the more things that we can do to help them be successful, the more I think then we have a good, healthy team that is productive, that they get along well, that they're able to fulfill their job functions very well, and that kind of thing. And yes, thank you for your clarification in the comments, Carol, that you're eager to support. You just don't feel qualified to be their primary resource and support. Absolutely. Yeah. And you shouldn't be, in my opinion, their primary resource for support. But you can support yourself. And it's a little bit that idea about not being able to pour from an empty cup, right? The more you are supported as a leader, the easier it will be to have appropriate boundaries with your staff, to have, be able to be there and support them in appropriate ways, and to model the behavior that we really want to see. And I think particularly, it's common in helping professions and in nonprofits as well that we see, a lot of people are in those jobs because they care so much. And the downside to that is sometimes that there can be an imbalance that happens, and they give so much of themselves, and staff can give so much of themselves through their work that then they're drained and depleted, and that can impact the organization as well as the individual employee, right? But it also has an impact to the organization. But I'd love to hear from anyone else here, like, what thoughts do you have on the role of an employer in around creating a space for like health and wellness for your team? What do you think the challenges are? What do you think the benefits are? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think that's where I'm sort of stuck with all of it. I want to help out my team as much as I possibly can on things. And I've also had to tell myself there's only a certain amount of hours per day that you can dedicate towards
Mm-hmm.
making sure your team has what they need.
Mm-hmm.
Like we just took the stance actually starting last week with our team where we got them gym memberships at a gym literally walking distance from the office because in my mind and our board's mind, like that gets them the opportunity to escape and sort of focus on themselves for an hour or however long it takes. But
Mm-hmm.
we know that's just a small piece to it in my mind. It's like, what else can we do without feeling like our shoulders are being weighed down with the day to day that we need to focus on as leaders, while
Mm-hmm.
also making sure our team has what they need to get through the day as well, too.
Right. Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
know you want to share, Krista. I'm not remembering how to unshare. Crazy me. So
Yeah. Is it showing my screen now?
no, it's at least for me, it's showing mine. So
Okay. Um, let's see. Are you able to stop sharing your screen, Yvonne?
I'll try to.
Okay. Is it showing now for everyone? Thumbs up?
No.
No? Okay.
I just, I don't know. It's weird. If I just click share, it shares it. I don't know how to unshare it. Not crazy.
There's not a little red stop share that you're seeing on your screen. Okay.
Sorry about that. Remember how to unshare is a phrase I might need thrown at me really often. How do I unshare?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, technology is great. Yvonne and I were joking, we were saying in the beginning, kind of joking and saying how often Zoom and all these other software that we use for business change all the time. And so you're like, it used to be, I went to this screen or this menu and then found what I needed there. And now it's different. But while you're working on figuring out how to unshare, Yvonne, we'll continue our conversation if that's good.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
I'll try to.
Yeah. Yeah. Carol, you had something you wanted to add?
No, I just think remember how to unshare is a great phrase.
Yeah, right.
Not about Zoom, but just, in conversation. I
Sometimes I
imagine
say,
that.
yeah, sometimes words come out of my mouth and I'm like, how do I unshare that? Oh, wait, no, it's too late.
Yeah, I'm just lost about it. So you keep going. I might grab somebody.
Yeah, great. So yeah, let's dive more into this conversation because I hope that this will be helpful for all of you. And like I said, to resource yourselves and to give you an idea. And this presentation is something that I go into organizations and do for teams. So, when you're talking about resources, there are external resources, of course. And I can work on getting a list of those together for you and sending that out as an email after the fact. But in addition to that, thinking about bringing in a presenter, whether it's me or someone else, to do a presentation like this that helps employees resource themselves is another thing that you can think about. So you're getting a chance to see what this presentation is and to feel like, hey, do I think this is something that would be helpful for to bring in for my staff? So uh, we're going to dive right in here. And I'm just here to remind you that if you have a brain, you do in fact have mental health. And just like we all have physical health, we all have mental health. And so let's talk a little bit about what that means. So some people live with mental illness, and according to the National Alliance for Mental Illness, 1 in 5 Americans lives with a mental illness. And so a way to think about that is just like an individual who might live with a condition like diabetes, okay? If someone has diabetes, they have to manage that diabetes. They have to, take medication. They have to manage their diet. They have to manage their exercise, and they have to take steps to take care of their condition. And the same thing is true with a mental illness. For those 1 in 5 Americans who lives with a mental illness, they need to take medication if that's appropriate. They need to take steps to care for themselves, okay, on a regular basis. Now, the other 4 out of 5 Americans that don't live with a mental illness, well, they still have mental health, just like we all have physical health. Not everyone has a condition like diabetes, but that doesn't mean you don't get sick. You might be a physically healthy person and you might get a cold, and maybe that cold develops into bronchitis or pneumonia. The same thing can happen with our mental health. You can be someone who does not live with a mental illness, and you can experience something in your life that creates like a mental health crisis. And it will be temporary, most likely, and you'll get through it. But what I want to see for more people is that we're having this conversation and we're knowing how to take good care of ourselves, and we're knowing how to be resourced and how to access resources so that when we get that mental health equivalent of a cold, hopefully it's not turning into bronchitis or pneumonia. It's not turning into something more serious, because when we start to struggle, we also start to take care of ourselves differently. Just like if you got a cold, you're gonna rest, most of the time. Maybe you won't, but a lot of the time you're going to rest. If it gets bad, you're going to go to the doctor. You're going to get maybe, some kind of prescription medication to help with whatever your symptoms are, if that's appropriate. You're going to change your diet for that time. You're going to drink more fluids and eat soup, right? And so what we're
Krista, I
talking
just
about.
made you a
Yep.
co-host. Sorry, I didn't know where to
Yep.
step in. I made you a co-host again. Maybe now you can get rid of me by you being the host. Made you the host.
Um, okay, let me try that, Yvonne. See.
I even brought in my intern who's like 24, figuring she knows more than I do, but she didn't know either. She's looking it up.
Okay. Let me see. Okay. Are you able to see my screen now?
And let me switch it to your screen. There you go.
Is that working?
Yep.
That's it. Okay,
Working on
awesome.
mine. You all see that? Got a brain? Yep. You have mental health.
Yep, I see it.
Great.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, we did it. Whew. It was a little sketchy for a minute there, but we got it. We got it figured out. Okay, excellent. So yes, what we're going to be talking about here is the equivalent of taking care of your mental health when you have a cold, so that it doesn't turn into something worse. And this is normal. Everyone is going to go through this. Every person is going to have some kind of mental health challenge at some point in their life. It's most likely going to be around a stressful life event, like maybe a death. That's a significant one. I think almost everyone will experience some kind of, temporary mental health challenges because of a loss. But it also can happen from things like a divorce, from a job change, from moving, right? There's so many things in life that can affect that. And so any kind of change, even a positive change, can impact mental health. So even something like getting married or having a baby, those are typically happy instances, but they can create a lot of additional stress that can impact mental health. And so anytime yourself or someone on your team is going through some kind of change, chances are it's going to have some kind of impact on their mental health. How severe that impact is going to depend on the person and whether they're, circumstances they're dealing with. But we can, in fact, improve mental wellness and build resilience during times of change and uncertainty. But let's take a moment here and just reflect on some signs that you may be struggling, because it can be really helpful when you're being proactive about taking care of mental health to notice what early signs of struggle look like for you. Now, this can be helpful to know for people in your life as well. But again, I want to reinforce that you are not responsible for anyone else's mental health. So I'm certainly not suggesting that you take this information and you start, watching everyone around you and saying, oh, I'm noticing signs of struggle. Let me fix it. Not your job to fix it. But if you do notice signs that someone is struggling, that could be an opportunity just to do a check-in with them and say, hey, how are you doing? But I primarily want to focus on what this looks like for you so that you're well resourced because it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. So I have on this slide some signs that you may be struggling. And my invitation to you is to notice which of these feel most relevant to you. When you are struggling with your mental health, when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling anxious, any of those things, what does it look like for you? Because the sooner you notice, this is what it looks like for me, the sooner you can start to increase the support and resourcing that you have so that it does not get worse. And so, in addition to what we have on our slide here, I'd love to hear from you. What are one or two signs? I'd like to hear from one or two people. Like, what are other signs that you have noticed when you are struggling? And you're like, oh, it looks like this for me.
Well, I can hop in. I'm sure it's not easy for people to do, but I would say difficulty managing emotions. I'll just be like all over the map. And then rigidity. I'm like, nope, that's not it. Because it seems
Yeah.
like if I can control stuff, then it's easier. You know what I mean? If we can just
Yeah.
not be
Yeah,
too.
like your desire to control more things increases. Like you're like, oh, I
Yeah.
want more control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I
Yeah.
get more rigid, I can hang on to everything for sure. And that's my first sign when I'm like, uh-oh, too much is going on. So
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Yvonne. And Steph, yeah, thank you for putting in the chat. You withdraw from friends and family and want more alone time. That is so good, like great awareness there to notice that when I start to withdraw, when I want more alone time, that is an indicator that I'm struggling. Yeah, just increased fatigue, absolutely. That is a huge one for me too. And for me, like even using these terms can look like different things for different people. So increased fatigue for me, it does not necessarily look like I sleep more hours. For me personally, it looks like I feel more tired throughout the day. And sometimes it even feels like my limbs feel heavy and like it's a lot of work to move, to do normal movements. And so, if you can get even more specific about what it looks like for you, that can be helpful just to support you later to notice, like, oh, okay, I'm noticing some of these signs. I'm noticing that feeling for myself that it's difficult to get through the day, or, my limbs feel really heavy. Other people, increased fatigue can absolutely look like sleeping more than they would normally sleep. Or for some people, it can look like sleeping less, and that's why they have increased fatigue is because they sleep less than they would normally sleep. So as much as you can get specific for yourself of like, what does it look like when I'm struggling? Because then you can start to have those early warning signs and then say, oh, I need to take some action here. I need to do something to take care of myself right in this situation because I'm noticing these signs that I'm struggling. I don't recommend this necessarily in an employer-employee type relationship, but also if you do have a partner or a close family member or friend, you can share with your close family member or friend what it looks like for you when you're struggling. And you can make a request in advance and you can just say, hey, if you notice this behavior in me, if you notice that I'm starting to withdraw, will you reach out and check in with me if reaching out and checking in with you is something that would feel supportive, right? And then you can let people around you know too, like these are the signs of when I'm struggling, and this is what I'm requesting you can do for me in those times when I'm struggling. And so catching it early can be really important and powerful because that's when we have more agency. The earlier we notice that maybe we're starting to struggle, that things are getting difficult, then the sooner we can get more resourcing on board. And hopefully it doesn't progress, that cold, if you want to use that analogy, doesn't progress all the way to pneumonia and just stays a cold or maybe only gets as bad as bronchitis, right? And that's like, so we know at what point do we start taking care of ourselves? Definitely, if you're going through change or uncertainty, that's a good time to increase your awareness. And if you notice any signs that you might be struggling, that's also a really good time to say, okay, I probably need a little bit more support around my mental health than I do when this stuff is not going on, or I'm not seeing these signs of struggle. And as I said before, during times of change and uncertainty, times when you are struggling, you can actually be developing resilience and improving your mental wellness if you have a plan, if you have a way to do that and you know what that looks like and you're getting a resource. So let's talk about what that looks like practically. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is self-care, and that these are strategies that you can use to support yourself. These are things that provide you with rest, that provide you with joy, things that rejuvenate you, things that fill up your cup. And again, this is going to be highly individual for each person, which is why I'm not telling you the answer, because I don't know the answer for you. Only you know the answer for you. When I give this presentation and we do a brainstorming session, we have people talking about like, what are the things? Well, inevitably, there will be someone in the room who will say, exercise. Exercise improves my mental health. I see Carol laughing. I don't know how you feel about it, Carol. For me, yeah, exercise does not necessarily, I mean, I know that there's like studies show, exercise can improve your mental health, but that's not one of my personal go-tos. That is like, if I'm already feeling increased fatigue, sometimes that's just going to make me feel more fatigued. Sometimes for me, it is truly taking a nap. Right, is the most helpful strategy. And so it's so personalized because it's going to work differently. One person is going to say, oh, what I really love to do. It sounds weird. I've had people say this when I've given this presentation. I've had someone in the room say, folding laundry, it's just so calming to me. And the warmth of the laundry. And it's like, there's that one person in the room that's like, folding laundry is a form of self-care. And everyone else is like, has this look on their face. They're like, no, laundry is not self-care. I'm saying it can be. It depends upon the person. So what I love to recommend for people to do is to make a list of what are those things for you specifically that make you feel better, that help you feel supported. These are things you can do for yourself by yourself. Maybe it is take, a bubble bath. Maybe it is going for a run. Maybe it's reading a good book. Maybe the last time I gave this presentation, actually last week, somebody said, I like to go to the movies by myself. And it's not isolation for this person. It wasn't isolation. It was just like, it's a chance to just go check out, and I don't have to be accountable to anyone else, and I don't have to coordinate plans with anyone else. I can just go on to whichever movie I choose at the time that I want, and I can sit where I want to sit, and I don't have to take anyone else into consideration. And to her, she's like, that's the thing, is like, go to the movies alone. So I really recommend that people create a list for themselves. And hopefully you're doing this when you are doing better with your mental health, because you're going to be able to be more creative and come up with more ideas most of the time when you're doing well. But it's still a practice worth doing, even if you do find that you're struggling right now. But to create a list for yourself, what are things that I can do or that I already do to support myself, to fill up my own cup? Because when you start to struggle, it becomes harder to think. Sometimes we can experience things like brain fog. We're not feeling as creative, we're not feeling as resourceful, and it can be hard to come up with the ideas of like, what can I actually do to support myself right now? What would feel good to me? And so if you have a list already, then all you have to do is look at your list. You don't have to come up with the ideas. I've also recommended to people in the past, some people love this idea, some people don't love it as much. That's cool. Everyone's different. Is maybe to have little slips of paper of the things you can do for self-care, like in a bowl, and you just go in and you grab one out and you're like, what am I going to do to take care of myself today? Oh, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to have a cup of tea and read a book. like whatever that thing is. And we all do things to take care of ourselves every day. And during times of change, during times of uncertainty, when we notice we're struggling, when we have that mental health cold, that's when we need to increase what we're doing. Because what works, the amount of rest that we need when we're not dealing with these challenges is not the same as the amount of rest that we need when we are dealing with those challenges. And I'm using the word rest very broadly here, right? Because that can include a lot of things. We can have mental rest, we can have social rest, we can have physical rest, we can have emotional rest, we can have spiritual rest. Like what are different things that support you? And so I really love for people to have a list for themselves that they can just go to that list and say, these are things that I can do to take care of myself when times are tough. And I like to talk about the analogy of putting your own oxygen mask on before you help others, because this is something in the personal development world that I see used a lot, is this idea of put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. And on one hand, I love that idea. And on the other hand, I say, wait a minute, let's stop and think about this. Because when we are being instructed to put on our own oxygen mask before assisting others, what is the situation that we're being instructed to do that? Like what is like when you're being told, you're on a plane, right? This is the first time we hear this, right? Is you're on the plane, you're getting the safety demonstration, and the flight attendants are telling you, in case of emergency, put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. So here's my take on how this applies to self-care. Please do not wait until it's an emergency to put on your own oxygen mask first. Please don't wait. Please don't wait until you have your own internal loss of cabin pressure to be like, oh, I think maybe I need to take care of myself here. I really invite you to think about doing something for self-care every day. It doesn't even have to be big, it can be small. Every day. Putting on your own oxygen mask first every day and not waiting until it's an emergency. Yeah. So before we move on, I want to check in. Like, does anyone want to share some things of self-care that work for you? Maybe we can do a little brainstorm session, get some ideas, or does anyone have any thoughts about this or that you want to add or any comments?
Well, I have a yoga app, and she's always like, when we're done with whether I take 15 minutes or 60 or whatever, and then she's always like, thank you for taking care of yourself before you take care of others. And that's probably the biggest thing. And I started doing that when I was working at the nursing homes during COVID. And we were doing 14 and 16-hour days. And just that moment of I'm caring for me before I walk out the door and give a bunch to a ton of other people was super helpful.
100%. Yes. Thank you for that, Yvonne. And what I love too that you said is whether I'm doing 15 minutes or 60 minutes. Self-care doesn't have to be like this huge thing. It can be 5 minutes, it can be 10 minutes, it can be 15. Yeah, Carol, you had something to add.
I don't really. I'm thinking. I think my. I don't know. Maybe I'm selfish enough that I'm always nabbing moments for myself. But I do. I think this would be a pretty interesting thing to hear from other people that surround
Mhm.
me at work. Like what fills your cup, and what are you willing to share about that? Like that in itself gives me a place to start in terms of if there's anything I can do to say go for it. Like here's either the time or whatever.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. A
Mhm.
gift certificate for a yoga app or whatever it might be, Yvonne.
Right.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. That's brilliant, Carol, to be thinking like if I had this conversation with my team, what things would they say? And then how can I help make that more available to them?
And it's
Like,
it's kind of shocking to me that I don't have truly, I have almost no clue. A couple of them, I have some ideas, but we've not had this kind of conversation. So
Right, right. And you don't have to be directly providing the thing to them, but just providing the opportunity for them to do whatever the thing is for themselves,
yeah, yeah.
right? Like it's like, is there a quiet space for them to go? For someone, I'm autistic. And so for someone who is autistic like me, they might sometimes really benefit from just having a low sensory space to decompress throughout the day. But if you don't know that that would be helpful to your staff, but that's something maybe you could easily provide is like, oh, we've got this empty office that's not being used. Let's turn it into like a low sensory room where people can go and take a 5 or 10 minute break. And just have a quiet space or a meditation room or whatever the thing is, right? Like, how can you help facilitate or create an opportunity for them to have little moments throughout the day where they're doing something to take care of themselves? Yeah, I love that.
And Steph put something in the chat. So
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Steph says walk around the block to get blood flowing and stay away from the computer screen. Knitting is also super therapeutic for me. Yes, I love those suggestions. And I'm the same, Steph, walking around the block, it doesn't even have to be a long walk. Just getting outside and getting into my body is so restorative for me. And again, as leaders, if that's something that you want to encourage for your team, if they would also find that helpful, is to be saying that, like, yeah, feel free to get up and go take a 5 minute walk around the block to get your blood flowing. Just creating the permission and the space for that to happen can be really beneficial. Yeah, love that. All right, well, let's move on and talk about some more strategies. So this is like the next level. So we talked about self-care, and those are things that people can do for themselves, usually by themselves. But let's talk about community care. And this is where people get resourced from the outside. This can look like things, for example, of when I'm struggling with my mental health, I have a friend that I call or a family member that I just call, and they're a great listener and they listen, right? That's one example, is like calling my best friend or my partner, someone, just to talk something out. That's one example of community care. Another example of community care can be letting other people take care of us in some way. And what does that look like? And the reason that I also love for people to have a list of things that would be helpful to allow others to do to support them is because, again, when we're struggling, like asking for help is hard for most of us. Okay. In the best of circumstances, most people struggle around asking for help. I'm writing a whole book on it. I've had so many conversations about it through this process, and as well as my own lived experience. And it's even harder when you're already struggling. It's harder to ask, it's harder to receive the help, because how about those situations too? I know I've been in the situation, and I invite you to be curious if you've been in this situation where you're going through something. Maybe you have had a death in the family. Maybe you have had a job loss, something like that. And somebody says to you, or maybe several people say to you, what do you need? What can I do? How can I help? My experience is that a lot of times when we are asked that question, it's really hard to think of any answers in that moment. And I myself have been asked that question and said, I don't even know. Like, I don't even know. So we're not getting all of the support that we could be, even when people are offering support, because they're saying, what do you need? And we're like, I can't even think of anything. And so if you have a list of things that would generally be helpful for you, then when someone asks the question, what can I do for you? You already have some ideas written down. And just like the self-care, this is going to be very personal. Some people are going to really like one type of support, and other people are going to be like, that would not be helpful for me at all. Right? And so, some people want someone to talk. That's really helpful. And I see this in the context of mental health used a lot. Like, people will post things on social media that will say, like, if you ever need to talk, I'm here. especially around suicide prevention. I see this like, I'm always here to talk. And it's like, that's great. But I will tell you that I'm someone who has experienced depression in my life. And I think talking can be helpful. But when I'm really depressed, when I am really, really struggling, and this happened to me particularly during 2020, during the pandemic, I was incredibly isolated. I lived by myself and was very isolated and really struggling with my mental health at that time, like many people. And I needed more than someone to just listen. I was struggling so much that I was struggling to manage the basic tasks of daily living. I was struggling with all of those regular everyday activities that just felt almost impossible to do on some days. And during the pandemic, I thought, because right before in January, a friend of mine had had heart surgery. And what happens when a lot of people have surgery is that like a group of friends and family put together this meal train for her before she had surgery. And we're like, okay, you know what? We know that she's going to go through the surgery and she's going to need some extra help. And so we're going to plan a little bit of support in advance. And so this happened in January. And then, of course, the pandemic happened just a couple months after that. And I really was thinking about that. And I was thinking, what if we did not wait until it was a life or death situation to start showing up for each other and allowing other people to show up for us? And what if we could just start showing up for each other when we were struggling just a little bit and we're giving help and receiving help and support and care? And what could that look like? Could fewer people avoid getting to a crisis point if we normalize this experience of like we just show up for each other? And so I had told some friends how much I was struggling during the pandemic. And one of my good friends, Amanda, she did offer to set up a meal train for me. And it was hard for me to accept it at the time. Like I wanted to say, but that's ridiculous. Like I'm perfectly capable of like preparing meals and doing things like that. But the reality is that I was struggling a lot, and having any task taken care of for me was in fact really helpful. And I put on my list, it wasn't just meals. I mean, Meal Train was the website that we had it set up on, but I put on my list other things because we were socially distanced and I was very isolated. I was like, schedule time to go meet me outside for a socially distanced walk or for a picnic. Like that was something I asked for. And, I also said because I was physically alone all of the time because of the pandemic, I was like, you know what? Mail me a card in the mail because that's tangible, right? It's something that I can put on my mirror or on my counter or something, and I can see it. I'll walk by it a bunch of times a day, and I'll be reminded that there are people out there who care about me and who think of me. And, those were some of the most supportive things to me at the time. So when we're talking about community care, it's like I really invite people to come up with like what would be helpful for me to receive when I'm struggling. And it can be the same types of things that you might need help with if you were about to have any kind of surgery or something. That's a good place to start, is to think about, if I were going to have surgery, what would be helpful? And that's a good place to start. And, a lot of this is going to be stuff that like, you're not necessarily going to get help with from coworkers or from your boss, your employer, but from your family and friends, right? But as leaders, you can resource yourself, and you can also be the model for employees and maybe even just like plant the seed or give them the idea of like what would be helpful, even if they're not getting the help from you, that they're like having the idea that I'm allowed to get help. Like I deserve to be supported. I deserve to be resourced and have people come in and help me with things. So I'd love to hear some ideas from, those of you that are live on this call today. What are some things that you either think would be helpful for you to be supported in, or you have maybe done for others that they told you was really supportive. Like, how can we be showing up for each other? This can look like so many different things. It can look like a phone call. It can look like, just checking in from time to time. It can look like, think about the love languages. It can be acts of service, it can be quality time, it can be physical touch, right? Again, we're not talking about employers and employees necessarily here, but just like as an individual, like what are things that help you feel cared for, seen, supported? Because the more clear you are about what those things are, the easier it becomes to ask for them, and the easier it becomes to receive them when someone literally says, how can I help? What would be supportive? So yeah, thank you for sharing in the chat, Steph. I love the card idea, showing up with a meal or snack, flowers, a little something that shows someone was simply thinking of me. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
I know I'll say a big thing for me is the checking in part of it. Like to me, that makes a huge difference, just knowing that somebody is just checking in on you. And I know speaking from when I manage my team and when they hit roadblocks mentally throughout the day, where when they come to me and say, "Hey, I need a breakaway for a couple hours," like I don't question them on that. Like it's there's no I don't provide I don't put up a barrier to them going, "Well, did you do this? And how about this?" Because then I feel like it
Mhm.
mentally it just drains them at that point in time and makes them feel like they're doing something wrong if they walk away and take that break. So whenever my team comes in as well too, it's more of I actually just had this discussion with one of my team members the other day where she came out and asked me like, "Hey, can I go do this?" And I said to her, "I'm like, don't ever ask me. Just do it. Like if I shouldn't question and shouldn't need to know the exact details. If you're hitting that roadblock, just go ahead and do it."
Yes. Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. See, when we start thinking about what it could look like, we get more and more ideas. We're like, "Ooh, it can look like this, it can look like that. It can look like just taking that break when I have a roadblock." Um, yeah, I love hearing that, the cards and showing up with a meal or a snack, flowers, or little something that someone was thinking of me. Oh, I know what this made me think of when you were talking, Justin. And during the pandemic, when I was truly depressed and I was really struggling, I also told friends when they check in, I'm like, how the check-in can be more supportive instead of saying, "How are you?" Because sometimes when people are really struggling, answering the question, "How are you?" can feel very complex. And it can feel like, well, I don't want to have to say I'm not doing well. That feels intimidating. And so I did share with some of my friends, I'm like, when you're doing a check in with me, what is most helpful is just let me know you're thinking of me, especially if a response is not required. That for me personally, again, I'm autistic, and sometimes social communication can be very draining for me. For someone else, it might look very different. So this is where it can be beneficial to know yourself, but to get really specific and say, yeah, checking in on me, and specifically checking in a way that does not require a response from me, so that I know that someone's thinking of me. I can respond if I have the energy. I can respond if I'm feeling a little bit better. But that I know that it hasn't become then a social demand that I respond to the check-in. Um, and so getting really specific can be super helpful too. And I think a meal or a snack is just like always a great way. And again, that's just me. There might be somebody else that's like, "I think that's a terrible idea, Chrysta." And I'm like, "Cool, then what works for you?" Because we are all different. But yeah, I love the meal or a snack of like, it says I'm thinking of you, but it also gives people a way to take care of themselves, because we need good food to fuel our body. We need water to fuel our body. Right? There's certain basic needs that we have, and sometimes it can be overwhelming to try to meet all those needs ourselves. Or sometimes we just get so busy. Like Yvonne, you mentioned during the pandemic that you were, helping out at a nursing home and working these really incredibly long days. Like I imagine it was probably there were days that you didn't always stop and take a break and eat food throughout that. Like it was just, there was probably sometimes just like, I'm just going to push through.
Way too much coffee, that's for sure, which wasn't good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, but if someone stopped and gave you food, maybe you would have been more inclined to sit
Oh,
down and eat it.
absolutely. We were thrilled. I was going to share that I had my daughter when I was 39. So I was considered a geriatric pregnancy, which sort of makes you laugh when you work in nursing homes with 100-year-olds. Um, and I had Pacific Care insurance, which no longer exists, which is too bad. And what they gave you was a nurse showed up in 48 hours at your house. And then for the first 6 weeks, you had a housekeeper for 2 hours a week. And at first I'm like, oh, I don't need anybody to clean my house. I'm very fastidious and neat, and I don't. And oh my God, that was the best thing ever. Like, number one, it was because my house was cleaner, but also because it was social. I had something to look forward to on Tuesdays at 2 because someone came while I was isolated with the baby. And when the nurse came, you're 39, you're supposed to know all the things. Having a baby is a traumatic thing. There's a lot to it. And I never really understood how, like, you could drop your baby off at the fire station when you feel overwhelmed. And I totally understand that now. I totally get it. And I have no judgment about any of that. I'm like, I totally understand what your body's gone through and what the baby's like. When the nurse came, she's like, well, your baby's kind of cold. I'm like, what? She goes, the baby wears one more layer than mom. And I was like, wonder how I missed that somewhere in all the training and all the books and all the things. My poor daughter is a warm-blooded person, so she never has to wear that many clothes now. But that coming to my house and just giving me confidence in being there, and it was set up and it was a part of it. And once Pacific Care left our region, I always thought, are those things still offered to new moms, to new people? And I was 39 and educated and have a degree in human development, and still all those pieces meant so much to me. And when you asked that question, I went right back to that time. So I think I didn't even know I needed those things. But now when somebody has a baby, I ask them, do you need somebody to clean your house? When are you going to see the nurse after you have the baby? Because then I make sure that those components happen for them.
Right, right. Oh my gosh, I love that example. That's so great. Yeah, and I'll say too, help can look like so many different things. I have done for people. So when someone is struggling with their mental health, so many, like I said, ordinary tasks can feel impossible or just insurmountable, or I don't even know how to get started. I don't know if any of you on this call have been in this situation. I know I have been in this situation. I know a lot of other people who have been in this situation where, let's say whatever it is, whether it's a physical health issue or a mental health issue, and you need to go find a provider. And sometimes trying to find a provider in network can feel like such a daunting task because you have to look at this long list of providers, but that's not enough just to look at the list and pick one. You also then have to contact that office and say, like, are you accepting new patients? And then if they are, you have to schedule the appointment. And sometimes like that can feel like such a daunting task. And something that I have done for others in the past is I have offered when somebody is like, I'm struggling, I realize I need to find a mental health therapist or, a psychiatrist or whatever. I have offered to people, I've said, would it be helpful if I narrowed down the list of providers for you and I will make the phone calls. I can't, make your first appointment or whatever, right? But I can just contact those providers. I can contact 10 providers on the list and say, are you accepting new patients? How long is your wait list? And then I can just compile a list that then I hand back to that person and I can say, of the 10 you gave me, I contacted them. These are the ones that are accepting new patients, and this is the wait time or wait list to get in to see them. And just even something as simple as that can be so supportive. Helping people do sometimes that kind of research because it can feel so overwhelming to have to find a new provider or get started with taking care. So, again, hopefully this is just an idea that's kind of getting us thinking about like, what are some things that would be helpful to me? So when people ask the question, how can I help? We have some ideas. And so when we are the one offering help, we have some specific things we can offer. Yeah.
Great. So I think we have about 4 minutes. Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So I invite you now just to take a moment and let's just do a mental wellness check. So this is for yourself. I'm not going to ask you what your responses are, but where are you right now on a stoplight perspective? Are you green? I'm doing good, great. yellow, okay, kind of iffy, or red, I'm not so good, or I'm really struggling right now. So just noticing that for yourself. And if you are yellow, if you're doing okay, but not great, my invitation to you is to implement today one of the strategies that we've talked about or something that you thought of, whether it's a self-care strategy or a community care strategy. And if on your check-in you are red, you are really not doing well, my invitation to you is as soon as we get off of this call to stop immediately and do something to support yourself, whether that's self-care or community care, to immediately go do something to take care of yourself and to not put it off and think, okay, well, let me do all this other stuff first and then I'll take care of myself, to really make that a priority, especially if on your check-in you are at a red. And then just to wrap up, I want to thank you for your time here today and for participating in the conversation. This is one of the things I really love to talk about because we all, like I said before, we all have mental health. Some of us live with mental illness every day, like I do, and it has to be managed on a regular basis. And other people don't live with it, but we still experience mental health struggles that we need cared for. We need to care for ourselves and we need to receive care as well. And so if you're, driving with this conversation or my style, there's my contact information here on the slide. If you want to join my mailing list, you can get my once a month newsletter, and that will have all my upcoming speaking engagements as well as news about my upcoming book on the topic of asking for help, which I'm very excited about. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Would love to stay connected with anyone as it feels appropriate. And if you have any other, continued conversation, any other thoughts or ideas about this topic, always would love to hear from you, whether that's later today or next week or a month from now or 6 months from now.
That's awesome, Chrysta. This has been an interesting conversation and lots of good advice and things to think about and lots of ways to be interesting if an employee comes to your office and says they're not feeling well, to say, is it a red light, green light, or yellow light, right? I mean, just to sort of see where they are and then help them along that journey. So we appreciate your time today, all of you, for attending and joining us for our Tuesday Talent Series. Like I said, we'll send you out the slides and the recording, and it's also will be on our website. So have a good rest of your day.
Yes. Thank you.
I think I stopped it recording. It's hard to tell.